and then we're going to go off record. I'll call to order this District of Clearwater Special Council meeting for Thursday, May 12th at 3 p.m. I'd like to acknowledge that we are fortunate to be gathering today on the unceded territory of the Simp people who have been caretakers of this land since time immemorial. Are there any late items to add to the agenda? Seeing other than maybe hydrocarbon spill. Anyways, seeing none, can I get a motion to adopt the agenda? So moved by Councillor McKenzie, seconded by Councillor Frizzle. All those in favor, don't cut your finger off, Shelley. And that passes. Moving on to item 8, we have to move into in camera under sections. The meeting, there's a recommendation that the meeting of the Council of the District of Clearwater and senior staff as per section 91A L or I L of the community charter be closed to the public to consider matters pursuant to personal information about an identifiable individual holds or is being considered for a position as an officer, employee, or agent of the municipality or another position appointed by the municipality. Discussions of municipal officers and employees respecting municipal objectives and measures, progress reports for the purposes of preparing an annual report under section 98. Mover and a seconder for please on that. Moved by Councillor McKenzie, seconded by Councillor Frizzle. All those in favor, fingers still attached. We will move into in camera. Okay, we're back into it, and it's item 10.1, presentation from Mario Perotti to tell us what's going on with things, the official presentation.
Okay. Thank you, Your Worship, members of council. As I said earlier, it is good to be back in this room, and thank you for having me here in person. So we're here today to present the financial statements of the District of Clearwater for the year end December 31st, 2021. I have a brief PowerPoint that I will walk you through, but in your package, you do have the full set of financial statements there. Happy to answer any questions that you have on the documents themselves. And the statements that you have are marked draft because I cannot sign off on my audit report until those charged with governance, who through the community charter is mayor and council, have had a chance to review and approve the financial statements. But if it's council's pleasure to approve the statements, we are proposing a clean audit opinion. So these statements do present fairly the results of the District of Clearwater for the year ended December 31st, 2021. And so when we look at the financial results this year, and we start with your financial position, it's been an interesting year for all local governments in that we see fluctuations in your financial assets with cash and cash you have coming in increasing from 8.9 million up to 10.1 million. But then the offset, we look at your liabilities continue to be increasing, and we see things like the deferred revenue coming in, whether it's from Trans Mountain and other grants that you have there for parks projects, and that are all obligations that you have. So while your cash position has increased, we look at your net financial assets after we deduct your liabilities, and that's only increased by $1 million. So again, it looks like in the bank we're doing that much better, but those funds are already all spoken for. And if we look at your total revenues in a comparison to budget to actuals, your total revenues came in at 7.3 million versus a budget of 18.4 million. But as you can see, the biggest variance is that big blue line, that's your government transfers. We know that there was a $8 million infrastructure grant that didn't come through. With that money not coming in, the money wasn't spent on the project. So for your financial position, it's a net of 0. So even though we're quite short on revenue, the expenditures didn't happen. So financially, it isn't really a significant item. The other item to note, though, we see the public health segment increased. A budget of 132,000 came in at 998,000. And that is predominantly the septage revenue as a result of Trans Mountain. So again, some of the spin-off benefits that we see in the community. And sorry, we do have a couple pie graphs to have in here. But when we talk about having $7.3 million in revenue, it's important to understand that, you know, a third of that is that 2.9 million in your property taxation base. And when we look at other communities of your size, we see that they're in the third up to half of their revenues come in at property tax in terms of dependence on property taxation. So it is a big number, and I know that you have a lot of diligence that you put into there. And so I encourage you to continue watching that number. When we look at your expenses, we talked about revenues being under budget, so were your expenses. Expenses came in at 6.4 million versus a budget of 8.4. The two main swings were first in general government, which there was some staffing shortfalls and savings there, and also the community forest revenues came in lower than expected, so the budgeted expenditure from the commission came in lower than expected, but again, net neutral, that part of it. We also saw that in community development or planning and development that we were under budget. The economic development officer position didn't get filled until late in the year. And we also saw some project delays, whether it was because of grant funding or just staffing, that we saw that you were underspent there. And again, another pie chart just showing the breakdown of the expenses by the various types. But when we bring it all together, we come to an annual surplus of $900,000 this year for accounting purposes. And in your statements, you'll notice that it was a budgeted surplus of $10 million. This is the part where I remind you that when you budget for the community charter, the way you budget is different than how we show it on the financial statements. And so on the financial statements, when you have capital projects, we show it as an asset, not as an expense, but in the community charter, we have to show it as an expense. So you budgeted $10 million surplus for accounting purposes because you were going to have $13 million in capital projects. But with the funding not coming through, you didn't spend 13 million on capital projects, you only spent 1.5 million. And so when we get to this net change in financial assets, that adjusts for some of these differences. And we have a modest surplus from a cash perspective of 1.2 million, which got moved to your unrestricted surplus and to your reserve funds. And then when we just pause on your accumulated surplus, we can see that you have $47 million in surplus. That is not all cash. That is cash plus what you've spent in the home that you call the District of Clearwater. The equity in your home, what we track you've spent in the district in buildings, road infrastructure, and all of that is $39 million. Your unrestricted surplus sits at $2 million, and that is a combination of general, water, and sewer. And your reserve funds are sitting at $5.6 million. And this slide shows the breakdown in there. We will highlight that included in there is the Community Forest Commission. And if we back that out, your overall reserve funds are sitting there for you, set by council, are at about $4 million. So before I move to the audit results, are there any questions on the numbers themselves?
Questions of Mario on the numbers themselves? Thank you for that explanation and all our little quirks in there, like the community forest and everything else. And yeah, we have an expensive house anyways.
So the last item, just do want to take a moment before we move to motion in just talking about how the audit went itself. You know, there was significant turnover in your finance team and in your management team this year. As you know, we did start the audit later, but I'm happy to report that our plan we didn't have to deviate from our plan, and we didn't have any significant difficulties in the audit. Your new team did well in feeding us the information, and we weren't really having to adapt our audit approach. So all the results were consistent with what we would have expected this year, which is important. We did have some internal control items that we brought to your attention in the closed meeting, and you know, we know that management will be proactively working on those and has already responded to those in our management letter and has their commentary in there. And lastly, I also want to highlight that one of the significant risk areas that we do address every year is what we call management override of controls. So whether it's senior management or council, you're in a position where you can circumvent the controls and influence how staff direct funds within the district. We do have procedures that are targeted to there that we do every year. We change them up every year to make them a little bit more unpredictable. But all that testing came through with no exceptions in there. So again, very important for you to know that in the current environment. But over and above that, again, we're issuing a clean audit opinion, and I want to publicly thank your team. They did a great job in helping us get through the audit and make sure that we got the information in a quick and transparent way.
Thank you. Any questions on this part for Mario? No. Thank you. Thank you for everybody's work and for getting it done in a compressed time frame, considering we had so much change in management. And it's great to have another clean audit report. That's fantastic. Thank you for your coming on up and for your presentation.
Thank you.
There is a recommendation on the floor that council accepts the 2021 audited financial statements as presented by Mario Perotti, manager BDO, at the May 12th special council meeting. What is the will of council? Wish moved by Councillor Frizzle, seconded by Councillor McKenzie. All those in favor? And that passes. Thank you, Mario. The next item is item 10.2, staff report on the backhoe procurement. And I believe in budgeting, I'll let staff speak to this, but it's we just missed the PSC on budgeting, but we're still under budget on this, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Thank you, Mario. Safe drive.
Thank you, Mario. With respect to the backup procurement, staff requires an additional $8,230.20 to complete the purchase, to include the full PST cost. That was an oversight on our part in the earlier motion in the previous meeting. The overall savings for the project relative to the budget authorized by council will be a total of $30,664.80.
Any questions on that? If not, there's a recommendation that the council authorize an additional $8,230.20 exactly to be funded from the 2022 unrestricted surplus to complete the sale. Mover and a seconder on that. Moved by Councillor Frizzle, seconded by Councillor McKenzie. All those in favor, and that passes. In your package, you have an interim director of finance report from Doug Chapman. It's quite a detailed and interesting report. If you have any questions right now, we can do that, but if you don't, take time to absorb it and get back to Mr. Thomas or Ms. Klassen for questions on it. Any comments from your table? No, that's good to go on that. There's also in your report is a water restriction policy direction. This is about sprinklers, etc. Councillor Bamford, who wasn't here yesterday, or can be here today, did put in his 2 cents that he would like to see current sprinkler times cut in half somehow, whether it be down from 2 hours or whatever. So that's kind of where he's at. I kind of agree with that point that maybe we have 4 hours, yeah, which is an awful lot. It's basically on an honor system for the most part. There can be bylaw enforcement of it. How you would, unless you reduce the hours to say 6 to 8 in the morning or 7 to 9, there's a lot that you'd have to leave up to the public to be honest about, because bylaw enforcement or neighbors to report on. I think this is just trying to get public awareness that we need to do a little bit better water conservation, but the bylaws in there, the current policy or bylaws in there, so you can have a look through that, and I assume we will bring it forward at another meeting. But if you have thoughts on it right now, go right ahead, Councillor Frizzle.
My question is, I mean, if we cut it in half, 2 hours, 4 hours a day, basically, what it'll be, 2 hours a month, 2 hours a night. I think people can handle that one. I think Councillor Bamford was talking about 2 hours total in a day before. But I can see that happening if it's like at a certain temperature. That's too hot, you know, because then the water's.
Mr. Thomas can speak
Does
to
that
this.
make sense to say
Yeah.
that? Can we?
It does. I think council can approach it from based on realities in the operations department. So if we're running into issues of supplying the town adequate water, I think that would justify increased restriction. But council can start as a baseline with 4 hours. And then with, depending on the severity of water production, you can increase that as council may wish. And you could do that by resolution.
Mhm. So, go ahead.
And I believe, yeah, I believe that there was also thought of putting in preset triggers that if certain events happened, like the reservoir hit a certain number, that we would automatically go into water restrictions. And, or, you know, climate event or whatever the triggers would be. So
Would that be a void alert if there was a trigger like that?
Yes, council.
You could do that with
Yeah.
that,
yeah,
plus every other way of doing it.
yeah, but it's, yeah, what do we do as a protection of the water system as far as water levels, that sort of thing. So anyways, it's there for you to read, and then we'll bring it back and have a more fulsome discussion of it in the future. Item 10.5, there is a contract, a recommendation, Reed Trails contract. Mr. Thomas, any comments on this?
The summary of this project, we have combined Wells Gray into the roundabout and Dutch Lake Trail as one RFP. We have received one proper bid in the amount of $773,813.13. And staff is recommending council award the contract, following which the contractor will be announced publicly.
So there is a recommendation here. Any questions of staff on this one?
Once it's passed, how long before they start?
That's a great question. Once the resolution is passed, staff would enter into contract signing between the mayor, the CIO, and the contractor. Once the contract is executed, we will confirm the schedule of the work, and we will pass that on to council as well, and then we'll go from there.
Anything further? Yeah, that for sure. Yeah. Yeah, so we'll get your microphone down there because we are being recorded. But yes, yeah, the fact that it had gone through SIP is extra, many layers to this thing anyways. So there is a recommendation that council, oh, sorry, Councilor Sim.
I just want to make sure that, so this was on BC bid, is that correct?
Yes, councillor.
And how long was it on BC bid for?
I believe for a total of 20 days roughly.
20 days. Okay, so anybody in our district could have bid on this.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, yeah.
And we reached out to several of the companies that are known to have the ability or suspected to have the ability, especially those in Clearwater and surrounding areas, and made them aware of the opportunity if they wish to be bid.
Okay, so that sounds great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I do remember being asked. So there is a recommendation that council award the contract for the construction of the Wells Gray Inn to Roundabout and Dutch Lake subdivision trails in the amount of $773,813.13, and that the mayor and CAO execute the appropriate documentation. Get a mover and a seconder on that. Moved by Councillor Frizzle, seconded by Councillor McKenzie. All those in favor? And that passes. Thank you. Yay. Okay, moving on to bylaws. 2022 annual tax rates bylaw 265 2022. There is a recommendation that the District of Clearwater bylaw number 265 2022, the 2022 annual tax rates bylaw be adopted. Can I get a mover and a seconder on that? Moved by Councillor Frizzle, seconded by Councillor McKenzie. District of Clearwater 2022 annual tax rates bylaw number 265 2022, a bylaw to establish 2022 annual tax rates. Whereas pursuant to section 165 of the community charter, council has prepared a 5-year financial plan for the period of January 1st, 2022 to December 31st, 2026. And whereas the 5-year financial plan as presented has been considered and approved by council, and whereas it is necessary under section 197 of the community charter to establish tax rates to raise the revenue for municipal purposes identified in year 2022 of the 5-year financial plan, and whereas to meet its taxing obligation in relation to other local governments, public bodies, certain amounts are to be collected for the year 2022 by means of rates established by the District of Clearwater. Now, therefore, the Council of the District of Clearwater in open meeting assembles and acts as follows. This bylaw may be cited as District of Clearwater 2022 annual tax rates bylaw number 265 2022. All those in favor? And that passes. Thank you.
Do you want to make any comments on that tax bylaw or anything?
Off the top of my head today with the COVID brain, no. But yes, we basically came in neutral to last year's taxation. So most people, if their assessment is relatively in line with everybody else's assessment as far as how much it went up, say if your assessment went up 30% and that was sort of the median, you'd be paying roughly the same taxes that you did last year. So most people should see very little effect on their taxation. Actual taxation dollars, maybe actually a slight decrease, unless their assessment is out of whack with higher or lower than the average assessment for our region. So, which is good news for us. Councillor Sim, further on that?
Yeah, I think also just in lieu of the report that we just had from our auditor is the fact that a lot of the discussion was had about the tax rate not moving too high, you know, and a lot of that real focused conversation. But there does need to come a reckoning, and the fact that our reserves really need to be looked at. And I think as the district, as a community matures, I think that was the word that Mario was using, emerging from adolescence, was that it?
Yes.
Is that part of that is accepting more financial responsibility and the fact that life costs money. And if we want to look at our roads and if we want some other infrastructure and growth, we're going to have to look at some other tax measures. And so we have a year to discuss that.
Yeah, tax and other revenue sources, as many other communities are looking at, and the greater issue that the world is getting more and more complex. The responsibilities that we have as municipalities are more complex and therefore maybe more expensive, especially on emergency management, things like that. Losing my voice. Thank you. Okay, anything further? Motion to adjourn. Thank you.